YouTube comments from a video titled, "Why Medieval Bread Was a Superfood While Your Modern Bread Makes You Sick." Part 3.
At Blasteria6540 wrote,
Our governments don't want US to reach our full physical potential. So ALL food is adulterated to keep US from becoming giants we read about in the Bible.
At Superman and Spider-Man wrote,
I bought a kitchen grain mill 12 years ago and started to make my own bread. I grain the wheat einkorn, dolar, spelt, lind, and others, just before I start a new sourdough. Dolar wheat is my personal favorite for taste. Sometimes I pour whole grains in the sourdough too. They soften up after a day or so. Once you get your classical sourdough bread right, you don't go back to modern bread again.
At Duckering wrote,
A fascinating video, and I really intend to dig deeper into it for sure. But it's disingenuous to say medieval people didn't suffer from XYZ disease. Modern medicine keeps people alive for longer. The death rate historically was astronomical, and depending on the period of time, you were lucky if 1 out of 3 kids made it to adulthood. Of course, diseases and allergies existed historically. They just killed people off much more quickly and easily, and that was just life. That said, I do think there's something to be said for keeping older and more traditional methods of food prep around. So much changed in the past 125 years. Most of us today would be baffled by some of the things we'd see if we went back in the past. We've definitely been sold convenience at the cost of independence and self-reliance.
At Like Water Baby wrote,
If I eat wheat, I have an asthma attack, and I get very itchy. The allergic reaction lasts for up to 3 weeks, where I'll be using my inhaler 2 or 3 times an hour, sometimes more.
At Fact Finder Jesus-sized Lord wrote,
Oh, sorry, I didn't mention the atrazine sprayed on crop fields to prevent weeds. Does anyone mention that this atrazine pre-emergent causes male frogs to be gay? Go figure.
At Dark God Seti wrote,
Wait, people built buildings with bread? Nito? Didn't people put whatever in bread in the old days to make a profit? 100% sure they did. I'm glad at least you didn't say modern bread is made of chemicals, when in reality, everything besides subatomic particles are chemical, even water. So you misuse the word chemical. Everything is made of chemicals. FFS. Your whole freaking body is made of 100% chemicals. All bread is made of 100% chemicals. Prove me wrong and explain to me how bread is not 100% made of chemicals.
At Janelle Alfonso 1824 wrote,
God said in his word, he will fill you with the finest of weed. And also Jesus said, men cannot live by bread alone. But I think that also meant that some people that were poor could just survive off of bread. That's all they had.
As Sheila Bang wrote,
IT reminds me of the time they removed the B- vitamin-rich chaff from the rice grains. That caused beriberi, stripped the rice from B- vitamin ios in the rice.
At 8, Bitsarda 747 wrote,
This kinda reminds me of how Subway is legally prohibited from calling what they serve sandwiches in France, due to their bread having so much sugar that the French legally classify it as cake.
A Hypnopants Online wrote,
Bloating, fatigue, brain fog. Dude, I was born with IBS and ADHD-PI, predominantly inattentive, bloating from IBS, and brain fog from ADHD. And my particular ADHD causes immense lethargy. How the hell am I supposed to tell if the bread is causing this?
At InBeauty Way LLC wrote,
As long as it was cooked, it was NO Superfood. THE True Superfood Bread WAS, Bake B, YTHESUN, Owen Stone. ITUS teach original Essene bread OF Yehuda.
Sidun wrote,
I make my own bread now. Organic, non-bleached flour, salt, water, yeast, and sometimes some goat milk. Delicious, and I don't experience the negative effects that processed carbs used to cause. Less is better.
At Alistair Smith 2173 wrote,
As a child, I was diagnosed with a soy allergy, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as it moved me away from eating most processed foods, including mass-produced bread. I don't eat much bread these days, but a few years back, I used to have around half my diet based on homemade bread, made from organic stone ground wheat and spelt with other whole grains thrown in, and I thrived off it at the time.
At Kathleen Egan 6658 wrote,
I use the no-knead recipe from the New York Times. Einkorn wheat stone ground, water, and sometimes salt. My question is the sourdough starter essential for nutrition? Typically, I add 1/8 teaspoon of grocery store Fleischmann's yeast and let my dough rise/ferment for about 21 to 24 hours. Mix the dough around 1 p.m., shape it, and bake it the next day, late morning or early afternoon. Am I ruining the nutritional value by using modern yeast, not sourdough?
At Xmount 6504 wrote,
As a kid, I remember squeezing an entire slice of Wonder Bread into a tiny cube and eating it like a pill. Modern yeast is a patented strain designed to raise bread in 2 hours or less. Sourdough start that you keep in your fridge and feed twice a week raises bread over 8 hours. By the end of 8 hours, the gluten content goes from 70,000 ppm to 70 ppm. This does not happen over 2 hours. In addition, many unhealthy things are added to commercial bread to make it whiter, make the voids in the bread consistent, and extend the shelf life. The flour has been stripped of the hull, germ, and oil to prevent rancidity. Learn to grind your own wheat on the spot. Start and maintain your own sourdough start, and make your own bread. Instructions are on YouTube.
Kelvistras wrote,
If you want to make your own bread, in addition to normal flour, add about 20% wholemeal flour and 2 spoons of ground flax and chia seeds. Will slow down digestion considerably.
At Misha Deftones wrote,
Bread WASTHE absolute favorite food OFO you are Lord Jesus Christ during HIS earthly life. ITWAS with loaves. ND fish that Jesus FED thousands OF people WHO listen to OHIS sermons modern food industry IS a poisoning industry.
At Richard 9782 wrote,
While in the East, people were eating rice for thousands of years and still do. It's the rice products that are unhealthy. The paddy cooked into rice is still one of the healthiest source of carbohydrates. Correct me if I am wrong.
At Hannibal Banana 1561 wrote,
My blood sugar spikes so easily with bread, and then I get shaky. I stay away from the normal breakfast foods cause I would pass out in an hour. Waffles, pancakes, muffins, toast, a recipe for disaster. I usually have shrimp for breakfast law.
At Alex Zoyerson wrote,
Buy a home mill and mill your own flour. It's awesome even if you use organic wheat berries without sourdough yeast. The key is to mill your own flour and not buy flour from the store. Search it up on YouTube.
As Creationzo 2015 wrote,
I have been making my own bread since 2018, and it's the best thing I ever did. My very own sourdough bread. I might have to try using spelt in it and see how it goes.
Kavanji wrote,
Unbelievably, if you want to buy unprocessed flour for making your own bread, it's not available, INTH UK. Yes, you read correctly. You have to buy it from abroad. All the flour that's made here is ultra-processed shite. This flour is added to tens of thousands of other products as well. No wonder that illness and disease are skyrocketing when everyone has one option. Basically, eat utter shite or starve. The government is to blame for this, and they should have stricter rules and regulations on what can be added and considered as food.
At Everyday Adventure 7512 wrote,
YouTube needs to get a hold on this AI crap. All well and good, but without citing references or documentation, this is just a pile of Reddit and other hack site opinion mixed with random video clips.
At Seeker of Reality wrote,
You only said at start of video that people were hardworking physically. How many are today forced to do such hard work? Only a fraction what happens to rest. Our evolution and biological memory has something else, but what most people do are not what that memory is. Meant them to actually do IMO. That's part of the main problem.
The Switch wrote,
The last loaf of bread I bought sat in my cupboard for 4 and 1/ weeks. No mold whatsoever. I live in a hot climate without central air. I will not eat bread anymore. I'm sorry, I just don't trust food that doesn't go bad. I can't see how putting that much preservatives that's something that should go bad in under 10 days isn't at 3 times the amount of time.
A Curious Crandall 1 wrote,
And using a bread maker is no good if you use fast powdered yeast. The bread maker cycle only rises for 30 to 60 minutes, so is little better than Chorleywood bread from the shop. I was getting ill from my homemade bread. Now I eat M&S soft white bread. It claims to be made with a sponge process. I no longer get ill after eating bread.
At Aloysius Jackson 5812 wrote,
Wheat, corn, soy, and oats are grown in the U.S. have incredibly high levels of glyphosate. If you are going to eat these, they need to be organic. The glyphosate causes gluten sensitivity more than any other reason.
At Superfly 29RR16 wrote,
Jesus said, I am the bread of life. He compared himself to bread, which used to be a staple of life. I've been milling my own flour from wheat berries and making bread in a bread machine. Works out great. Has so much more flavor, a lot more filling and nutritious. The bread of life.
At Green Jack Surf wrote,
Eat your Wonder Bread, white rice, in Twinkies, and do not ask questions. Don't ask about the strange oils or processed sugars. Right? This comes back to bakers. People want bread that lasts weeks. It costs nearly nothing to make. Eat your Doritos and Pringles and stop asking questions.
Chuck Finn wrote,
Bread causes eczema on my feet since around the time GMO food was introduced. I cut it out of my diet and it goes away. Nothing with flour tastes right now like a slightly bitter aftertaste.
At Deep Cognition IU5BV wrote,
While I appreciate this kind of content, it's important to remember that the solution suggested here is utterly incompatible with workload expectations and spiraling inflation of modern society. We need something far more extensive than individuals taking the time to bake. We need actual change to the governing systems of our societies. Governments, laws, fiscal policy, workplace authority. These are the venues of power that can tackle a problem of this scale.
A John Clark W. wrote,
When I started having health issues, I started making my own bread. You only need flour, water, salt, and yeast. Sometimes I add olive oil in the dough. Sourdough is even easier on your stomach than yeast-style loaves. The only thing to get used to is develops mold within about 4 to 6 days, sometimes faster in the summer. Making my own bread turned me into a better cook as well.
30's 1X wrote,
Are there any ways to buy heritage flours? Family likes to make a ton of homemade bread, and if we can try and make it more healthy, it would be a big boon.
Additives wrote,
For Americans, there is a brand that makes bulk 25-pound bags of organic einkorn flour that comes from Wisconsin, called Great River. Deaf support them and start making our own bread again.
Kavanji wrote,
The amount of shite in food nowadays is criminal. It isn't even food. You are better off eating nothing. I eat one small healthy meal every 3 days, and I'm still slightly fat. If I eat any processed, stodgy foods, I'm ill straight away. Stomach wrecked, indigestion, bloating, constipation, and stomach cramps. Meat is reared with antibiotics and weight gain additives. Fruit and vegetables are tasteless and loaded with pesticides. Even eggs have no taste whatsoever nowadays. I remember when all farms used to sell eggs and they tasted heavenly. We are all buying expensive shite that is slowly making us very ill.
At Scott McEwen 1729 wrote,
Without bothering to look anything up, my knee-jerk reaction to this video is that it's probably like 50% correct but also 50% misleading. For example, it mentions the number of ingredients in modern bread and concludes that it's a science experiment. The number of ingredients in something doesn't prove that it is a science experiment, nor does it prove that it's unhealthy. Another example, modern wheat really probably wasn't bred for only one thing: yield, not nutrition. And the video implies that we should leave wheat alone in its natural state, but wheat had already been bred by humans for thousands of years. It was not in its natural state. テストた場合です。いつないとあやたの清掃を。Natural is not related to healthy. Arsenic is natural. It will kill you dead. Lighting is natural. It will kill you dead. Lions are natural. They will kill you dead. Houses are natural, but you need shelter. Again, this video does seem to get a lot right, but the things it got wrong should give you pause.
Chewy Toenails wrote,
Traveled to Egypt for 6 days recently from Middle America. My gut was very delicate at that point. I already avoid bread here, no fast foods, so many things I simply cannot eat, nor do I want to eat them anymore. Suffice it to say that I was beyond nervous about what food would be available. The first day there, I ate 4 times. He wanted to try everything, even bread there, because I was curious and suspicious. I had brought all the remedies, Pepto, Tagamet, Alka-Seltzer, Gas-X, even a doctor prescribed Z-Pack, all just in case my gut decided to throw a tantrum. That night, I slept so good. I awoke with so much calm natural energy and felt happy and no longer in pain and depressed. After just 6 days of eating everything that Egypt had to offer except minced okra, tasted good, consistency of runny eggs, yolk, I felt amazing. I felt alive again. He was no longer hungry all the time. I mean, I used to get hungry while I was eating. WTH, I had proven to myself that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't some genetically flawed medical mystery. So then, I arrived back home. Just for an experiment, I purposely awoke on the first day back and immediately ate 1 piece of bread from here. Instantly things went south. Tasted really bad, like eating a Lysol-soaked towel. It just seemed to dissolve rather than need chewing. It was difficult to swallow. About 15 minutes later, I was in the bathroom. My energy tank, I felt sad again. I awoke the next day after not sleeping well at all, with the all too familiar brain fog. He spent the next 3 days like that, not really sure if I had ever really slept or fully woken up. I would be found or find myself just standing in rooms, not knowing why I went in there. My short-term memories seemed to be working well below half capacity. Now, I have spent a large amount of the last of this year changing all my eating habits. I have uprooted the normal routines and rebuilt my life. The more of better food I get, the more energy I get, and the better and easier day-to-day life becomes. I feel calmer and happier. No pills, no handful of vitamins, no need for caffeine. Sleep better, think better, way less anxiety that causes erratic emotions. With no needs for caffeine or fast foods, etc., I have also found that I have money, like leftover money after bills, etc. I don't know what to do with it. I am sure it'll disappear suddenly and I'll have new rims or guitar or something pointless. But that's a battle for another day. It still ain't easy. These profiteers of industry are sneaky, tricky bastards, and I find myself horribly angry with that industry and profiteers of our misery. They want money so badly. Well, they ain't getting it from this person in that way no longer. Forget politics, forget religion, forget culture, forget borders. Realize that things are getting out of control for all humans. It is not just one faction's fault. It's everyone's. One person cannot alone change the world or even their town. But one person can make a difference for themselves and those nearest to them. Not by force, but by showcasing what is possible. Helping those out there to remember what real food is and can do. We all know this depth down inside ourselves, we have just forgotten. Our souls remember, our being, our bones, our genetics, what real food is. What it can do for us. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing. Over and over again. Expecting a different result. The food in America is certainly and simply not working. What is the definition of the word diet? What a species consumes to survive. Well, we ain't surviving very well, are we? The human body wants to heal itself, but you have to let it. Keep swallowing poisons, it will eventually run out of energy and just stop trying to live. There are things in the past that should never happen again. This is in our memories, in our stories, in our histories, in our souls. All telling us what not to do, some things change for the better, some things do not. Sometimes we're too close to the project to see the whole picture of what is really going on. Maybe because that is how they want it. We are in the very midst of one of those what not to do moments that will be one of many on the historical list that future humans will look back on the history of our species and think as we do now about our past. Why? It seems that we are seemingly destined to repeat ourselves a few times before we really stop the insanity. I have always said, if you want to know the future, just look to the past. For example, what was happening 100 years ago in the 1920s? The Industrial Age's beginnings, the Great Depression, famine, the Dust Bowl, the Spanish flu pandemic, the Prohibition, and war. World War I. Now, here we are. Here we sit. In the midst of the beginnings of another age, one of technologies and humans giving birth to artificial intelligence. Having just suffered another pandemic. Another almost depression and sitting on the verge of another world war. Why ask myself this, and maybe you should too? At what point will things finally calm down? What is one of the key things that would help everyone to feel less angry, depressed, sad, anxieties? When will we all not be just plain sick, tired, and in pain anymore? I don't know all of the answers. I don't even know if what I know is right. However, I do find myself as of late leaning towards one main idea to begin the healing. Food. Real food. The sooner we all fix the food, the sooner the future looks brighter. The sooner we are no longer worried. This is just of many puzzles and problems to solve in this world. But it is a good place to start. I live in a community full of rednecks and hippies that generally do not like each other and clash often. Yet, not ever falling into any groups or cliques my whole life. I stand outside of this and listen to both sides complain about the same things. Food is bad. Country is in trouble. I wish you all the best of luck out there. Now go find something to cook and eat that is real. Here's a tip. If it doesn't spoil within a week to just a few days, it isn't good for you. Thank you for this video. Though I often wonder now, in what other ways are these greed and power seekers going to manipulate things to keep the control and money? What will they poison us all with next?
A Skullhead FE wrote,
I agree that bread was much better than today, but to say that bread was healthy, no way. Carbs is still carbs. I have grown with ancestral bread, which was much better from nutritional perspective than today, but still unbalancing for people over 30 to 40s. Period. Besides that, none constructed true marvels with hammers and chisels eating bread. This is fairy tales for credulous people.
At Infotainment Z7F wrote,
On top of this ultra-processed wheat flour is used as a thickening agent in many other food products in the form of starch. Look at all your pre-made sauces, soups, etc. from the supermarket. It will shock you how many times wheat flour starch is put in products that you won't expect as a thickening agent. E.g. pumpkin soup, with wheat starch in it. Coconut yogurt, with wheat starch in. Organic tomato sauce, with starch in it. So you think you're buying a healthy product such as a coconut yogurt, but it gets ruined by all the starch. I have severe IBS and had to just ban all forms of grains temporarily in my diet, including corn and rice starch, because it's just in everything.
At Rakigai wrote,
Medieval lifespans average 30 to 35 years on average. Those who manage to survive to age 30 might live another 10 to 20 or so if they survive their youth. They really didn't live long enough to die of the most common things we die of these days, since we live so much longer.
At John Crispin 2118 wrote,
One of the multiple ingredients mentioned omitted was palm oil, so why the hell do the makers of so-called artisan bread still use the damn stuff? I bought myself a bread maker, and now make my bread from organic flours including wholemeal, strong white, and a multigrain white from Matthew's flour in the Cotswolds, and olive oil. Cost over a year or two after buying the bread and maker still cheaper than supermarket finest.
At Outdoor Adventure TV wrote,
After a lifetime of intestinal problems, doctor's visits, and endless medications, I tried a gluten-free diet and my life immediately changed. I tried going back to a gluten diet and immediately regretted it. It's a difficult diet since flour permeates our foods, but for me it's one that is absolutely necessary.
At Buny Cinnamon wrote,
It's true. When white bread was introduced, it caused severe malnutrition on children and adults because they had replaced their bread intake with it, meaning they were eating basically sugar. That is why the new standards require white bread to have some vitamins and minerals be injected into the dough.
Timamoto wrote,
Yes. This last year I bought myself a grain mill and have begun making my own delicious homemade sourdough, freshly milled, whole grain loaves. It's such a relief to me to be making good nutritious bread for my family. This was a great video, thank you. I encourage everyone to make the leap.
At Ophiuchus 3267 wrote,
Modern bread. Aka USA made chemical abomination. In the EU, there are max 4 to 5 ingredients in bread flour: water, yeast, and salt, plus some optional nuts, seeds, and grains, mainly for texture. EU made bread is freaking delicious.
At Giganyormum wrote,
They in fact do not survive off of it. They all died by age 40. Bread may have been better, but it's not the reason for their hard work.
At CR250R15 wrote,
All these comments crack me up. We need to stop eating processed food. We're being poisoned. Sorry to break it to you, but if everyone ate 100% fresh food, it would be completely unsustainable. You want to go live like a medieval person? Good luck living past the age of 50.
At 83 Glacius wrote,
Son, what you showed isn't bread. It's shite here in Romania. We don't eat such crap. We eat proper bread, like the one you praise they ate in medieval times. Stop eating crap.
At Ramzan 1971 wrote,
Visited Spain. They eat tons of bread daily. The bread is delicious and baked inside taverns and restaurants. They don't eat ultra-processed bread wrapped in plastic. They eat bread with every meal and everybody is skinny.
At Loranrabirds 308 wrote,
Great-grandma determiner baked bread. I remember when she couldn't get good flour anymore. Angry old German gal, haha. It was the best wheat bread I'd ever had.
At Afos 34 wrote,
Just to let y'all know, none of our grandparents had celiac disease because it wasn't diagnosed. Celiac disease is a gene passed on through parents to their children. It doesn't just develop. So yeah, once doctors found out what it was, people could actually get diagnosed, and thus diagnosis rates go up. That being said, the sciencey manufactured grains didn't help at all in making people feel better.
Astrix Fireman wrote,
I've never had problems with bread of any kind. Though I do miss my grandma's immaculate homemade breads. Banana bread, bacon bread, blackberry bread, table bread, so much closer to the medieval bread.
At Andriostoni wrote,
What kind of garbage bread are you guys eating that it makes you sick? Don't you have bakeries that make fresh bread in the back where you live?
At 1996 Shaun wrote,
Very interesting video. I do not like the fact that you are comparing the overall health of our grandparents and ancestors with modern day health. They had no way to identify their illnesses, and many of them could not suffer from modern day illnesses because they were dead from a common cold, tetanus infection, or smallpox, just to name a few. Besides this, they were also more resilient. They could live with constant pain and in difficult conditions that today we can't even think of. For them, hardship was just the way of life. Access to a physician was reserved for emergencies. Because of this, I am skeptic to many of the other claims that you made. I cannot contest them because I am not an expert in grain or gut health. What I can say for sure is that the evil bread that you are describing is referring to the US bread, which by Europe's standard is more related to cake than bread. If any of you in the comments want high quality bread and you can't find it in your stores, search on YouTube for no knead bread. You will work maximum 15 minutes of it.
At Jab 9109 wrote,
The answer isn't some secret conspiracy. It's capitalism. Literally just capitalism. That's it. The modern bread isn't poisonous. It's bad quality because companies provide the bare minimum for as much as they can take with no oversight.
At Lohikar Mahara 1753 wrote,
Real us up food. Ice got pebbles and stone dust from the fucking millstone. Ruins your teeth. Then an occasional batch of hallucinogenic seeds that make you trip out and see angels/demons, driving you insane. No thank you.
At Fourth Gospel 21 wrote,
52. So, would you say that it's not as necessary as scientists or media suggests to have a highly diverse diet? Obviously, people at that time got enough nutrients almost from bread alone to survive, and I ask myself if the processed food I eat is really good for me.
At Goose 4342 wrote,
I've been looking into buying some hard white wheat berries and a small mill, and making my own bread. A good slice of bread with some good quality butter spread on it is a meal unto itself, in my opinion.
Todd Douglas Fox wrote,
Bread did not become a rampant gluten issue or gut inflammation problem until GMOs and sprays for crops like glyphosate was introduced. I started my first business on my own at 13. It included home-backed bread and pies from stone ground flour while using an overnight fermentation process. Everything was grown and harvested by us and those nearby. There were no issues with eating it for anyone. We did everything the way that people did it hundreds of years ago. After the sprays and the GMOs were in full swing is when bread became an issue for larger and larger numbers of people. Regardless of level of problems with bread, ALL grains are a substitute for protein intake because, as you say, during winter and in areas of poor economy and other such needs, grains have had and continue to have the role of keeping large groups from starvation. All around the world, the raising of crops has changed, and we are now suffering the results, mostly over the last few decades. Yes, the ancient breads were much more beneficial for digestion, nutrition, and health. But again, grains are a substitute for the nutrition we require, and all of them are used for the most part so that we don't starve to death in massive numbers. The wheat germ is not enough protein. The oils are not enough fat. The minerals and B vitamins are not enough of those nutrients. Certainly, there is enough fiber in most bread. Bread was never a complete food. And while the body did adapt, and it was much easier to process than the bread of today, it was not only incomplete nutritionally, but displaced the food required to meet nutritional needs. How long did people live in medieval times? Not long enough to get OA and other degenerative diseases. Had they lived longer, yes, there would have been more evidence of these issues. Of course, nothing about our modern food, crops, ways of eating is superior to that of many of our ancestors. It could go without saying. Throughout history, reliance on bread has caused malnutrition and death because it was not enough then and it's not enough now. It has spared us and it has killed us, regardless of methods and sources. Those who were wealthy were able to afford better seed, growth medium, land, and production. Bread and all grains opposed to popular belief are not a part of the major food groups. Not only are there better ways of growing and using grains better for us, but no grains is even better. If you can afford it, no grains is best. Know that it's not just wheat, it's all grains.
At J. M. 1997 wrote,
Makes 100% sense. When I eat my whole grain oatmeal in the morning, I have energy for 5 to 8 hours when I return home and eat sandwiches. I'm starving within 1 to 2 hours.
At Jimi Hendrix 731 wrote,
While it's true most commercially available breads are not great for you, the diabetes epidemic and gluten intolerance is caused by excessive dietary fat and extreme general inflammation from eating too many processed foods and not enough fruit and vegetables. There are plenty of simple ingredient breads available in most grocery stores. I eat 6 loaves of bread a week, have perfect health, and am 8% body fat at 40 years old.
At Kelly Suter 4381 wrote,
232. That must be bread from somewhere else. I'm in Australia, and I went to read the bread bags. We don't have half that stuff in our bread, although there are extra vitamins added.
At Owateniafu 6935 wrote,
Then again, medieval times had the Black Death, Crusades, Spanish Inquisition, and very bad diarrhea. So I might call this a draw. At least we have antibiotics and separate our poop from our water supply mostly.
At MRJ 389 Abel wrote,
What is misleading or false the exaggeration? The toxic modern wheat claim. The video claims a University of Kansas study found modern wheat triggers higher immune responses. This is false. The reality. Studies, including those from Oklahoma State and Kansas, have found no significant difference in the inflammatory response, or ATI, content amylase trypsin inhibitors between ancient and modern wheat. The immune system reacts similarly to both. The issue is likely the processing lack of fermentation, not the wheat's DNA. The yoga mat chemical. The video claims bread contains azodicarbonamide, a chemical used in yoga mats. The context. While true that this chemical is used in plastics and some industrial breads as a dough conditioner, it breaks down during baking. Furthermore, it has been phased out by many major chains like Subway in 2014 and is banned in the EU and Australia. It is not in every modern loaf. Glyphosate drenching. The claim that farmers universally spray wheat with Roundup glyphosate just before harvest to dry it out is an exaggeration. The reality. This practice desiccation occurs, but it is not the industry standard for all wheat. Statistics suggest it happens on a minority of wheat acreage, often 3% in the US, though higher in wet regions/years. However, trace residues are frequently found in non-organic wheat products, though usually below EPA safety limits. Medieval Health Utopia the video. The video suggests medieval peasants had no diabetes and perfect gut health. The reality. This is romanticized. While they likely had less type 2 diabetes due to extreme physical labor and lack of refined sugar, they suffered from malnutrition, ergot poisoning, fungus on rye, and other severe health issues. They didn't thrive purely because of the bread. And I'm a firm believer we are being poisoned, but when you have clowns like this exaggerating, it makes it impossible to be taken seriously.
At Silverwolf 3636 wrote,
I was a miller for about a decade. The bottom line is our current population just can't be supported for heritage bread. We had 5 mills in our mill, one of which was a whole grain mill with stone instead of the metal rollers. I would make only about £40,000 an hour, while our other mills make about £200,000 an hour. Not to mention so few of our customers, mostly bakeries, as we produced flour in bulk that would never even touch a bag, just blown into a truck or train car, and then blown into a silo at a bakery, could afford our whole grain. That said whole grain mill only ran maybe 4 days a week, while the others would run 24/7. Like you said about yields, it's all about economy of size. I don't think that the global population boom of the last century is unrelated to the changes in milling and harvesting. Shout out to U of Kansas though. They are like the biggest leader of wheat research outside of Italy.
At Rajasporna 6405 wrote,
I like how you mentioned sources for many of the things you said.
Please also list those sources in the video description. That improves your credibility. It would allow me to forward this to people and convince both myself and others that this is legit. Two YouTube channels I follow do this well: Real Science and Real Engineering. Many others exist too. They just put numbers on screen whenever they wish to cite a paper and list those numbers with the paper citation in the video description. I appreciate your work. I would appreciate it so much more if you put citations. Lots of love.
At AK-47 Bobark wrote,
People in the Western world need start a grocery store that uses no plastic, only wax paper and jars that are encouraged to be reused, and only sell organic food. These massive conglomerate corporations are making tons of money off of killing us.
At Friedrichsbüttel's 4605 wrote,
Check my German bread ingredients. Looked normal. Water, salt, flaxseed, oats, sourdough, wheat, and yeah, some extra stuff like preservatives. Nothing like described here. You won't find any bread with corn syrup in Germany, and even sugar is super rarely added. Beside that, making your own bread is still very common in Germany.
At Richard Torwella's 2370 wrote,
This is why they hate the carnivore diet, which adds a little carbs and fiber through potato and fat through butter. Animal product is harder to screw with and corner the market on. Animal abuse would be required to make such low-quality raw meat, and dairy just doesn't sell if it tastes bad, which it always does when they try to mess with it. This is why Billy Boy wanted to make a new butter out of carbon, and why so many liberals push nut juice as a milk alternative.
At Wismike wrote,
What modern types of wheat would be best to turn into bread that is available online, assuming I cannot find locally? Also, while I want to keep heat and friction to a minimum, would a pestle and mortar be okay for grinding the wheat? I'm interested in learning how to make authentic bread similarly to ancient times, with the health benefits that come with a switch. This video was very inspiring. Would love to get into things.
At Hearthburn 1 wrote,
Your thesis has a flaw. No gluten insensitivity, no diabetes epidemic. That's because they died of it. 50% of children born didn't make it to adulthood, and things like that were some of the reasons.
At Prankster 1590 wrote,
This is all BS, since within a minute, he is describing the Middle Ages as an era of healthy people without any modern little pains. He forgot to tell that it was pure Darwinism in those days. The ones with diabetes and other stuff already died a long time ago.
At Juilliard 7574 wrote,
After our family started to bake our bread from organic wheat and rye using wheat leaven, I could never eat the industrial bread again. It is an entirely different product, and all the effects mentioned in this video are so true. What frustrates me is when I visit friends and they serve dinner. They don't care altogether, saying, let's live a simpler life and not overcomplicate things, though they suffer from a bunch of health issues. But then they just silence it with medications for pancreas, blood vessels, head.
At Let's Talk 1028 wrote,
I wish I could get bread without all these additives and wheat without pesticides. What is the best kind of flour to use? What kind of wheat? Is einkorn flour good?
At Deperditus wrote,
It's called Goislop for a reason. The rich and powerful wouldn't touch any of modern foods with a stick. So they feed it to tax cattle so that they buy more medicine from the medical industry.
At Virus Myth 4930 wrote,
Sorry, but no. Bread was never a superfood. It has always been a survival food and fodder for the lower classes that has been normalized after the advent of agriculture. Facts don't care about your feelings. And abundant fossil evidence around the world shows that right after humans started cultivating and eating primarily grain-based foods, they began to experience all sorts of health problems from smaller brains to osteoporosis, jaw malformation, crooked teeth, and tooth decay, just to name a few. Meat for the masters, bread and ale for the slaves. That's one lesson in history across the ages, from ancient Egypt to the modern era, whether we like to admit it or not.
The Thorny_misanthrope wrote,
Medieval people only lived into their 40s on average and lived in suffocating filth. Streets were open sewer. Water was often contaminated, and therefore the food was often contaminated. There were the constant threat of famine and plague. Vermin were everywhere and was contaminating your magic bread. This video is not complete BS. It's just romanticizing a horrible past to make a questionable point. People back then didn't have to worry about celiac disease. Chances are they were going to starve to death instead.
A Posh Pilgrim 1776 wrote,
For finer breads and pastries where you can't use heavy whole grain flour, I buy French and Italian flours from Amazon. Many people with gluten sensitivity can eat those with no problem. No GMO food allowed in Europe.
At Dreaming Flurry 2729 wrote,
Important, only what the US calls bread makes you sick. Good European-style French, Spanish, and German, for example, bread is still okay, as long as you don't overeat it. It's starch after all. While an accessory, it can also make you fat.
At Humor 2143 wrote,
If you get organic chakiata, that's made from whole grain emmer wheat. It will be far cheaper than buying specialty four in Whole Foods or the like. Note, chakiata takes more water than normal flour. I normally use 90% hydration.
At our 3ND3RR0R wrote,
I'm definitely on team market capitalism because look at all the miraculous technology it results in. However, it's undeniable that the same profit incentive that drives awesome innovation is the same one that drives greedy people to do horribly greedy things like selling the public harmful chemicals, toxic compounds, and other garbage as food. We shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But at the same time, it seems pretty clear to me that we at least need to recognize that the water is laced with hazardous compounds that we need to find an adequate solution to.
Jillian 1 John 3.9 to 10 wrote,
My first receipt for grain was dated July 30th, 2023, and I taped it in my Bible, GEN 42. From the first day I started eating wheat berries, I had 5 trips to the ladies' room equal pain-free. Regular BM ever since by day 3, my sugar addiction was gone. I lost 24 pounds in 23 days. And no more joint pain, gut problems, migraines, cramps, brain fog, age spots, inflammation, leg cramps, backache, cholesterol, anxiety, and I slept 8 HRS. I don't bake bread. I just soak the wheat for 24 HRS and simmer until tender. I sprout the wheat 4 days for extra nutrition. Every day, I add them to my dishes. I grind wheat in a coffee grinder. Add S/P, veg broth. Grill up 2 tortillas power bars. Sprouted grain oatmeal, raisins, peanut butter syrup. Other foods are expensive, processed, and makes my body feel terrible. My food budget went for $300/mo to $60. It's so cheap, delicious, and nutritious.
At Night Flight 935 wrote,
I find it incredible how willing we humans are to earn money making and contribute to things that would harm others and ourselves. Being a part of the consumer industry is basically being an accomplice to a legal crime that won't get you punished. And none of those producers have the consumer's interest in mind. in any field.
A suspicious Sarah wrote,
I do not buy processed so-called food. I am making my own food. You can have the modern wheat to make your bread, but you will have to fix your gut every day. And remember, eat O&E slice of home-made bread per day. O&E.
An acrylic goblin wrote,
As a person with a degree in food science and nutrition, as well as someone who has celiac, this video is very well done. The science discussed is absolutely correct.
An professional wrote,
I agree with this video. Does anyone have an ancient bread recipe? I am okay with making my own bread because the stuff in the stores is not good for us. I want an easy to follow recipe and is fermented so the bread too is helpful as this video describes. Thanks all.
Castle Hassel wrote,
Dude, it was really hard for the peasants back then. Please don't try to make it sound like they were in some healthy paradise. It was crazy hard for most of them.
A Dayman 1 wrote,
Less people with diabetes. Yeah, no shit. They all died from diabetes. Now we can keep them alive with medicine. This would be a nice video if the tone wasn't some wholly uptight grifting language.
At Ednut Luxton 4918 wrote,
Did you know the bread Jesus ate was unleavened? Flatbread? No gluten back then, because they didn't crush the grains into a fine powder. So the gluten stayed inside the tiny seeds or kernels, and the bowels took it out. Those ancient grains don't exist anymore on Earth. I have a list of them. Man has altered wheats, GMO, modified to grow fast in every climate and soil type, so wheat and grains today have zero nutritional value. Then they are pulverized into a fine flour, which releases the unhealthy, dangerous gluten. There's no healthy reason to eat bread. Gluten-free bread is usually rices, which are starches that turn to sugar, with a lot of added ingredients to try and make it hold together like bread. Not healthy either. Never eat bread or carbs. If you must, eat homemade flatbread.
At Luciferian wrote,
The anti-bread propaganda accompanied the keto-paleo racial blood memory resurgence that has coincided with anti-vegan propaganda via the non-Aryan barbarians, who we've allowed to rule over us lately.
44 wrote,
On watching the video, I've already started looking to see where I can grow einkorn naturally. The bread in the stores is just garbage. I was amazed that sliced brown whole wheat bread was lasting weeks in the kitchen. Never age or develop mold. And that was the best bread I could get. Well done with that now. Tired of feeling bloated.
A Darksaber 1111 wrote,
No one on here realizes people put lead, sawdust, and bone meal in bread and flour back then. But at least I'm not going to get lead poisoning from Walmart bread.
At Andrewb 8074 wrote,
Yes, the WHO marked it a likely carcinogen from a big picture perspective, but they did not say the amounts contained in bread are likely to be carcinogenic. Glyphosate has not been found to cause issues in anyone at current dietary content levels. This is not to say 100% doesn't scientific understanding evolves, but this video misrepresents what is currently understood.
A Jack 1D1XB wrote,
In only the last few months, whenever I ate a sandwich wrap/sandwich or any related wheat product, I experienced an excruciatingly bout of what I could only describe as my skin crawling similar to microfleas/severe itching, and would end up with not bite marks, but where I had scratched a small scab follicle injury. As I drove away from the wheat product, the feelings would ebb away. And the more I ate meat products, the less, as well as reducing my depression. So I'm inclined to think that these chain companies are manipulating the contents of these products and on ever-expanding false contents in our foods.
At Alexander Ivanov 69 wrote,
If you look at 95% and not the 5% of the reasons, it is very simple. Bread has always been described as a superfood because there was no food otherwise. It was calories packed, easy to make, easy to preserve, etc. Today, calories are abundant, and that's why things like bread don't do much good, because other than calories, bread does not contain really any nutrition, and overeating is very destructive. This is the 95% of the issue. The 5% is everything else like pesticides, bad preparation conditions and methods, etc.
A General Cato wrote,
Same with vegetables, fruits, meats. It's designed to look good, grow as fast as possible, and keep as long as possible. Nutrition comes last, if at all. That's why the vitamins, minerals, and supplements industry thrives. And even those aren't as good as they claim to be. If you can, try growing your own from non-GMO seeds. Compare with the same from the supermarkets and be amazed. It costs time and effort, but the gains are irreplaceable. Health and great taste.
A Jedmac 44 wrote,
There's a lot of truth in this video, but also a lot of exaggeration and rhetorical flourish. Calling modern bread poison, for example, is more vibe than science. The scary yoga mat chemical, azodicarbonamide, is another example. It's been restricted or banned in some places as a precaution, but at the tiny levels used in dough, the actual health risk is still debated and likely overstated, compared to the video's framing. If the Green Revolution hadn't happened, we wouldn't just be peacefully eating medieval loaves with a smaller population. Economic models suggest we'd have a much higher toll from hunger and malnutrition. More infectious disease as a consequence, food prices something like 35 to 66% higher than they are now, and a lot more land converted to crops just to keep up. The Green Revolution really did let us get more calories per acre instead of plowing up even more forest and grassland. The modifications to industrial bread are basically there to survive a long supply chain and sit soft on a shelf. Farm, factory, truck, grocery, your pantry. Without preservatives and dough conditioners, that kind of bread would go stale or moldy much faster, and the whole system would have to look different. There are trade-offs to living in a world of 8 billion people and not being an agrarian village. If you want to mill your own wheat or buy heritage grains and long fermented sourdough, that's great. There are real benefits there. But ancient grains aren't magic. They still contain gluten and anti-nutrients. They just have a somewhat different nutrient and protein profile, and some people find them easier to tolerate. And it's not as if medieval people were free of chronic disease. They had conditions we'd now call diabetes and other metabolic problems. We just don't have the kind of diagnostic records we do today, and many people died young from infections or accidents before those diseases could fully show up. To me, the more honest way to frame this is the same way a good doctor thinks about treatments. Here are the benefits. Here are the risks and side effects. Do the benefits of high-yield agriculture and shelf-stable bread outweigh the downsides? For a lot of people, the answer is yes, but I can still choose better versions of bread and eat less of the ultra-processed stuff. And for what it's worth, there are modern grain practices I'd happily complain about alongside you, like diverting huge amounts of corn into ethanol fuel, which burns water and fertilizer and often doesn't deliver the meaningful climate benefits people hoped for, instead of focusing more of that land and effort on nutrient-dense food.
At George Lake 4829 wrote,
I guess the Egyptian wheat allows one to move stone with their mind when eaten, lol. They want to shove the pyramid is 5,000 years old fable down our throats every chance they get. Like people with half an IQ point look at the pyramids and think all that was possible because of the bread they ate. I would bet the person or entity that caused the building of the Great Pyramid probably wasn't eating fasting. For spiritual purposes, because the technology and methods that built those pyramids transcends the material realm, that's for sure.
Packwolfie wrote,
Also, a big part of the issue is how wheat is harvested today versus beforehand in history. It doesn't go through the fermentation period of getting wet from dew and then drying out repeatedly.
At MarzinJD6437 wrote,
Grandpa said that bioengineered plants were a pox on gardens, as they will not produce a usable seed product that can grow another crop next year. He said that in 1984, he grew heirloom seeds only and never used pesticides unless the crops would be lost totally. He grew cattle feed that was totally organic and heirloom crops for silage feed in winter for cattle, and seed corn for planting in human gardens. He owned the local store and needed sellable seed crops that could create new seeds for self-contained farms that had no access to seeds for sale. We grew seeds that were 10 years old once they produced a passable amount of crops, shoe big corn old variety good crops.